Welcome back to Ray's Talk Show, the podcast that won't be silenced. This is your host, Ray Collazo. On this episode of Ray's Talk Show, Joe Napolitano reports from South Texas on how families continue to remain separated and are in legal and physical limbo on both sides of our southern border. And on a lighter note, the Cuban Lion, Nissim Leon, will join us to discuss what LeBron James and El Tri mean to Los Angeles. But first, I wanted to talk about haters. If you learn one thing from your experience listening to Ray's Talk Show, it's to understand the life-changing moment of ignoring haters. You may not figure it out until after a nasty divorce, or standing up to a bully in junior high school, or a spiritual conversion. But when that day comes, when you take the power away from others that put you down because of their own insecurities, your life will change forever. So this takes me to the aftermath and the lessons learned from Democratic congressional candidate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's incredible victory over 20-year incumbent and Queens Democratic Party leader Joe Crowley. Political pundits and haters of all stripes wrote her off as a no-name with no chance, not because of her ideas or the quality of her candidacy, but simply because she wasn't part of the quote-unquote machine. You see, these so-called Democratic Party machines live in infamy throughout urban America. Whether it's New York or Philly or Newark or Chicago, these party structures empower themselves by the premise that working people and people of color, and especially Latinos, and especially Puerto Ricans, can't move up the Democratic political ladder without them. These machines have been the biggest impediment to real power in our community for decades. And despite being an impressive Puerto Rican woman who was a child of this district, they could have taken her Boston University economics degree anywhere. She came back to serve her community, who are amongst the most voiceless people in our society. So the haters hated, and the haters and their so-called machine lost. And even after Alexandria won, pundits, many of which live literally just subway stops away from this district, had no idea this movement in the Bronx and Queens was happening under their noses, couldn't help themselves. They chalked this victory up to demography or a white man's incredible laziness, because the answer couldn't possibly have been a young Latina simply ran a supremely sophisticated campaign and had a work ethic similar to the countless women in her own district that worked 2-3 jobs just to survive. And even worse, the Bronx machine kept hating. Incredibly enough, Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., a fellow young Puerto Rican elected official, crowed that the loss of Joe Crowley would hurt the Bronx. Are you kidding? That's self-hating in its highest form. But it didn't stop there. Instead of embracing the best thing that has happened to Democrats in 2018, Democratic Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi wrote Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez off as an aberration. Wait, Nancy, until that fluke takes your leadership spot in the coming years. Quite simply, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's victory will go down as one of the most important moments in the history of politics for Puerto Ricans in the diaspora, and a major milestone in Latino and progressive political history in this country. Let's empower leaders like Alexandria. Keep giving them money, encouraging them to run for office. Copy the model of success. Put your middle finger up to these stupid-ass machines that aren't doing anything for our community. Puerto Rican women who are standing up to this wave of intolerance, this wave of hatred, at times self-hatred, like Ocasio-Cortez, Mayor Carmen Yulín, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, need our continued support. They are too busy making history to worry about haters, and you should too. Let's hear now from Joe Napolitano on the ongoing border crisis and Nissim Leon on the LA sports scene. And I'll be back to wrap up this edition of Ray's Talk Show.
On here on Ray's Talk Show to continue to provide people a real-life account of what is happening on our southern border, not only with the children and the families that are being separated and really being attacked in a way that's inhumane and I believe, and many of us believe, unconstitutional, but we also wanted to give you a sense of the reaction of the community to this situation on our southern border. Reporting in from the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, you know this woman as a longtime journalist with bylines at the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, and is actually in the process of writing a book about the plight of immigrant children in this country. Jo Napolitano, welcome to Ray's Talk Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jo, you as someone that's been a journalist covering immigration issues for many years, this isn't a new issue for you, and I wanted you to just paint a picture for us. You've traveled from the northeast part of the United States to really be at ground zero for this crisis, and you spent the last several days in South Texas. So just give people let's just begin with what you're seeing and what you're feeling, and just give people a sense of life on the ground now in South Texas for these children, these families, and the larger community.
So I wanted to just back up a tiny little bit and say that earlier in my career, my second job out of Northwestern actually was in McAllen, Texas. I was a reporter for 3 years for The Monitor, which is the daily newspaper down here. So I'm very familiar with this area. So after The Monitor, actually, believe it or not, went to the New York Times in kind of a lowly level job, but I did really well, then went to the Tribune, then went to Newsday. But I visited the Valley a few times in that time period, and now I'm staying with friends in McAllen as I report the situation. So basically, one of the things that I thought was very eerie when I first flew in to the airport, I flew into Corpus and drove 2 hours to McAllen, is how normal everything seems. If you didn't know that this crisis was going on, and I think of it less as a crisis for Americans than as a crisis for immigrants, if you didn't know this was happening, it really is completely out of sight. You kind of have to look for it, which is so strange, because when you think of a town, a community, a country, a region in crisis, you think, oh my God, you must be able to see this everywhere. You really can't. And that actually kind of hurt my spirit a little bit, because it reminds you how easy it is for nefarious things to go on unseen. We can drive, there's Starbucks here, there's Taco Palenque, there's like all these little, places, local and national, that you can just kind of go and shop and eat and live and really not have, pay any mind to this. So that's the first thing I noticed. So I got here in the evening on, I believe it was Wednesday night, and then Thursday there was a huge rally in Brownsville in which hundreds of people, if I didn't count the crowd, but I would estimate at least a few hundred or slightly more, maybe 300 to 400 people, got together in Brownsville to protest and to fight for immigrants' rights. So I was there, and while I was there, I met some really incredible folks from the local chapters of the ACLU. So I stayed there yesterday for the Brownsville rally. It was really great. And then the ACLU invited me today, this morning, to walk over the bridge, the international bridge that connects Brownsville, Texas to Matamoros. So literally you park on the American side, you leave your vehicle at like a gas station or somewhere nearby, and you literally walk through a checkpoint, over a long bridge, chain link fence everywhere, multiple Border Patrol agents, and you walk into Mexico. And it went, we walked around a little bit, and then we immediately actually took a strange turn. We walked into the country and then immediately out, because there are folks waiting, immigrant folks trying to get into the United States, who are being held on the bridge, literally sitting on the bridge in the sun, waiting for what the ACLU feels is like for an unknown reason, essentially, for several days, some of them for more than a week, according to the ACLU. The people I saw today, one had been waiting 4 days, the other, I believe it was 3 days. One family was from Guatemala, the other was from Cuba. And I was able to speak with them and take a few pictures and learn a little bit about what brought them here and their experience literally sitting on this bridge. And if you can imagine, I'm in South Texas, you get out of the shower and you're already sweating. It is really hot here. And to be sitting on that bridge in the baking sun, it's unbelievable. And they're putting up little sheets around them so that they try to get the sun away a little bit. They have water, and some aid workers are bringing over food because they really don't have any food. Today, another unusual thing happened. We saw that Mexican Border Patrol folks were coming to those people as they were sitting on the bridge and kind of offering them medical attention. And we got kind of a mostly positive review, actually, of that medical attention. But again, everyone's suspect. Everyone's fearful. People are worried. If I get medical attention and I literally leave the spot I'm sitting in, does that mean I no longer am in this little tiny line? Like, what happens to me? There's a lot of distrust. Like, does that mean if I accept your attention, do I get deported from Mexico? I mean, just really a lot of confusion and mistrust. So that's what I was able to observe today. And I saw one mother who was 21. She had a toddler, really beautiful little girl with her. They had traveled from Guatemala saying they were escaping domestic violence. And they had been in Matamoros for, I believe, 3 whole days. And I got to tell you, it's got to be in the high 90s today. And that's in the shade. Then there was another family, a dad from Cuba with his 2 children. I believe they were 9 and 10, a boy and a girl. And he, had felt he needed to leave the country, leave Cuba, make his way. He flew from Cuba to Mexico City and then Mexico City to Reynosa, I believe, and then got a ride over to Matamoros. I'm not sure why he chose this checkpoint necessarily, but he was there and they were there for days in an unbelievable heat. And I asked him, and he actually spoke English, which was great because I actually sadly don't speak Spanish, but he was speaking to me in English, and I asked him, what is Border Patrol saying when you literally walk over? They're literally standing 10 feet away. What is it they're saying to you when you go up to them and say, I'm trying to gain entry? And he said that they are telling him, we have no room for you. Now, what he determined, what he believes that means is there's no room for you in our shelter system. Now, because Border Patrol would not answer any of our questions today at the border, I don't know if that's correct. That's his interpretation. But he has been there I think he was there for 3 days.
You're listening to Joe Napolitano on Ray's Talk Show, giving us she's our eyes and ears on the ground, on the border, and even on both sides of the border of the United States and Mexico and South Texas, chronicling not only the best as she can, people that have already been detained by ICE and the federal government, but people literally who have refugee claims for various reasons, escaping all sorts of issues in Central America and Latin America. And I appreciate her time on a very hot day in South Texas. This really speaks, Joe, to how the U.S. government has conflated all of these issues between, quote unquote, undocumented or illegal immigration to people that have a legal right and are attempting to go through legal channels for asylum status for various reasons. And so this issue, I would imagine that this is just leading to the confusion and the frustration and to hopelessness of people that, sort of came here and sort of suddenly rules have changed, not only rules of sort of U.S. policy, but sort of international standards. And they're not only those rules have changed, but also their status or their attempts to come here legally are being demonized in the U.S. media, so by the federal government. So, are they aware of those dynamics? And I would imagine there's a frustration because this is not what they should have expected.
Right, and I think that they hear things that are going on, and as you rightly pointed out, I mean, I've been writing a book now on the treatment of immigrant children in American public schools, and in terms of just immigration in general, I feel like I'm hitting a moving target every day. There's a new piece of information, it changed in this way, or we're doing this, we're doing that, and then so much is done out of view. It's really frightening. To not know how your citizenry is being treated, how human beings in my country are being treated. They're being hidden. We're not allowed to see where they're at. That is not acceptable. And if you read Elizabeth Warren's statement on Facebook a few days ago where she had toured the same shelters I've been trying to get into, she did gain access to. Her description was really, really stunning. Talking about men being housed in pens, no access to showers, just begging for a shower. I mean, really, you could look at what she wrote, and it was jaw-dropping. So that is, nothing, and all bad deeds are done in the dark. And that's why it's so important for you. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing. You're trying to shine a light. This is nothing, no entity, nothing should be done in the dark, never, especially when it's human beings' lives. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion, frustration, lack of understanding. And I will tell you, as we were returning to the United States across the bridge, we met some Border Patrol agents, some friendly, some not. We met one guy who was pretty friendly, like outwardly very nice, but we noticed he was taking all of our pictures. He took a video and a photo of all of us who were there. And I had, I interacted nicely with him. He was friendly, but why was this person taking our picture? And we had asked him that, it's my private phone. It's going on it's just for my use. What use do you have of taking pictures of strangers? It was there's just a lot of mistrust and suspicion there, warranted, I believe. I don't know why a Border Patrol agent would need my photo, or the photo of 10 people that I'm with.
That's right.
I have no idea.
The other part of this dynamic, so I wanted to see if you have any thoughts about it, kind of being on the ground, is that, and Latinos and Americans, and particularly Latinos that don't live in that part of the country, I don't think we're as cognizant of this, is that a large percentage of the people that are doing the president's dirty work, I mean, the Border Patrol agents, the other law enforcement agents, even some of the people many of the people that are working at these, camps, these facilities that have imprisoned these families and these children, are Latinos that just wanted to get a decent paying job in a poor part of the country. And even if they don't have ill intent or being put in the front lines of this, and I often think about this concept because Latinos are sort of the most in this position, and now the most obvious example, but thinking about the Muslim ban and, just kind of, for lack of a better term, regular Americans that were just trying to do an honest day's work for an honest day's pay, even by just doing, quote unquote, I'm just doing my job, are being complicit in this fascism. And in this case, literally are pulling babies away from mothers. So I don't know if that's a dynamic you have any thoughts about that, because you literally have people on this side of the border who are Latino descent who are very engaged in the bidding of this government on many levels.
Right, and I will say the person who was taking our picture, I am quite certain, was a Mexican American. And so all of the folks that I saw who were Border Patrol, I don't recall seeing a white person. Perhaps I did and I didn't realize it. But most folks are of Latino descent. You know what? I kind of liken that, though, to our wonderful, brave, incredible people who are so dear to my heart, our American military, made of some of the most finest people in America. Actually, the one group of people I give money to every month is disabled American veterans, because that's how dear they are to me. But I think that if you have a job in which you are given an assignment, it can be very difficult to push back against that assignment. I don't think people on the ground who are doing their jobs day to day, I don't know what agency they have, meaning like how proactive they can be in going against that. I would not be able to do what they are doing, but I also, with my life that I was given, I felt I needed to enter a field in which I did not have to act kind of like a drone at someone else's command. It was very important for me to feel like I had control of what I'm doing, particularly because of moments like this. And I remember when I was a little girl growing up on Long Island, we learned an unbelievable amount of information about the Holocaust. I mean, a shocking amount, more than probably any other part of the country. I know a lot about the Holocaust, and it always really appalled me as a little girl. I also do grow up on Long Island. Everybody's Jewish. My best friend is Jewish. There's a lot of Jewish culture there, which I love. And I would always ask myself as a little girl, if something really bad happened in your country, what would you do? How would you live? Would you be a German kind of going around their business and, going to work and taking the bus and, or would you do something? And I cannot liken what is happening now to the murder of millions of people, but I will say in terms of a very scary time in our government, a frightening time for press rights. We just had a bunch of hardworking, amazing journalists gunned down yesterday because someone didn't like the work they were doing. I mean, we are not in a great time. And I hope and I pray that I am doing my part in my small part of the world. And I do believe we cannot be made to do what is wrong. And all of us, no matter what our station, we need to ask ourselves some very hard questions. And I think the first question is, what are you doing? And the second question is, are you doing enough? And I hope we can all answer that with a clear heart.
Joe, what's next for your coverage? I know you're going to be spending some time there. What is the angle and what's going to be your focus here over the next several weeks as you cover this crisis?
So what happened, what brought me here, I think is kind of interesting. I was actually, by the way, born in Bogota, Colombia, abandoned on the side of the road by my birth mother, placed in an orphanage, was not fed, almost died of starvation, was randomly adopted by a family from Long Island, very, very blue-collar family, came up to Long Island, got a good public school education, full ride to Northwestern University, and recently got, in 2016, a Spencer Education Fellowship of $75,000 to attend Columbia University in support of my research on this book. So I have kind of a very wild, from Columbia to Columbia type of trajectory, which is why I have such a passion for immigrant children and all the potential that is in these, that is in the hearts of these children who are so easy to dismiss. Because they're vulnerable and they don't have opportunity right now, but given the opportunity, they could really be, something absolutely incredible. So anyway, I was working for Newsday on Long Island in 2014 when 3,000 unaccompanied kids came to the island, and about half of them went to a very impoverished, very troubled school district called Hempstead. Hempstead, breaking the law, refused to seat the kids, refused to allow them in, several dozen of them. We reported on that every day for a year about that whole crisis. The state attorney general cracked down on schools that were refusing to admit the kids. Schools were asking for documentation that they knew the kids didn't have as a means to kind of keep them out. So that whole thing happened in 2014. It made me think, Long Island only got 3,000 unaccompanied kids, and apparently there's hundreds of thousands living in the country. Are they facing the same problem in other areas? And I did some research, and indeed they were. And that's actually my main focus, is educational opportunities for immigrant children. So in the next few days, I'm going to be reaching out to educators to talk about, they've had unaccompanied kids, undocumented kids, kids who are called SLIFE in education, which is, it's like limited literacy, essentially, even in their native language. So I'm trying to find out, when you deal with an older, high-needs child, what's the best way to help them academically? So that's going to be something that I'm looking at moving forward.
Journalist, and really someone that is one of the great leaders in a journalistic sense of chronicling the plight of immigrants. And Joe, when we have another time where we're not in the middle of this crisis, we need to talk more about that incredible journey you just shared very briefly and succinctly. I know there's many people listening to this thinking about a few other friends of mine that have very similar stories, being adopted from Latin America, and all of you've overcome. And I think the most important thing I want people to get out of those comments is that we all have a responsibility to give back, because the next Joe Napolitano is in these, I hate to say it, but in these cages somewhere in South Texas.
That's right.
And we need to protect these young people, reunite them with their families, because their mothers and parents, we can't. As a parent, I just can't imagine, especially the ones that have already been deported and are now separated by nations.
And the kids in foster care. We're reading about kids, so deep in the system. It's like, oh, my God. I can't even imagine what these people are going through.
It's unbelievable, and but thank God for journalists like you, Joe Napolitano, that are chronicling this and raising an independent voice to let us know what's happening down there. Anything else you'd like to share with our Race Talk Show listeners about your coverage, or anything else that you're working on?
I would just say, if this is an issue that is really touching your heart, don't let it go. Keep it in mind when you go to the polls. And I'm not saying who people should vote for at all. I know Republicans, I can't make that choice for you. But if this is an issue you care about, educate yourself about what your local leadership is doing and act on that. That's what I could say. Don't shrug this off. This is too big. And we're going to look back on this period as a very dark time. And I think we all have to ask ourselves, what was I doing then, and was I doing enough?
That's right. And it really is a fight for, to say the soul of our nation may sound a little dramatic, but the bottom line is that if we don't stop this, the United States is going to be the bad guys. And, thinking about sort of and when we were kids, Joe, kind of the new world order, right? Sort of like us leading the West and the Cold War and Russia and the Soviet Union back then and China and North Korea. And we sort of have created a ethos that we are a force of not only democracy, but of good. And what the president has done is sort of change that dynamic, and I don't think Americans are really focused on that, whether you like them or not. We're not the good guys anymore, and we're from an economic and foreign policy perspective, we're not acting like good guys. And so
but
you may like that,
you know what?
But you have to acknowledge that's where we're going,
You know what? I will actually push back on that a tiny bit because I'm 42 years old, and ever since I was born, we've been the good guys, and I've felt, good and proud about that. I got adopted into a good country and whatnot. I think there's a little bit of lying to ourselves about what we've done to the African American community over the past centuries, and there's a little bit of lying to ourselves about what we've done to women ever up until today. Let's look at the last presidential election as an example of that. So I feel like we have a little bit deluded ourselves about how good we are. But I see this as a moment to be good moving forward, to make right what was wrong, to be honest about what we've done to our disabled folks, our veterans, our women, our minorities. Look back at how we've treated these people and make today a new moment where we change that moving forward.
And it's so true because it's not just, the mistreatment of Latino immigrants didn't start 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So, kind of the fact that, we essentially have created this system that they lose no matter what. So we encourage them to come here. They lead the agricultural set, the service provider set, the restaurant industry, all these industries. They basically, wouldn't exist without immigrant population. And then when it's politically expedient, we punish them. And by the way, we treat them lousy from a labor perspective and every other way while they're here. And so,
right.
They're set up for failure. So that how would you say that penance that has to be served it's most stark about what's happened in the last 2 months, but it's not just about the last 2 months as it relates to how we treat immigrants.
No, and it's not just about Latinos. It's
right.
about, not even immigrants. Let's look at our Native American population. I remember being in high school and talking about these issues with my friends, like, oh, we're such an amazing country. Oh, except what we did to Native Americans. Oh, wah, let's put that aside and kind of consider America's history from like 1865 forward. And it's like, no. You can't erase parts of history that are inconvenient for you, or that make you feel bad. A real American, a real, patriot, a real global citizen or person with a soul and a heart looks back honestly at what has been done to all of these groups, and we can't go back and make everything right. But goddamn, if we can try, and that to me is what I care about. We should be able to try and not ignore things that are inconvenient or painful for us to acknowledge.
When it comes to all things LA, sports, good conversation, and trying to see really lay down what's important in life. I got to go to my Cuban brother, roaring back on Ray's talk show, the Cuban Lion, Nissim Leon. Your back, brother. LA is the center of attention yet again. As always,
oh, man, it was really special yesterday when I started getting text messages. And my cousin texted me, and he says, hey, LeBron's a Laker. And I went straight to the NBA channel and started watching, and I couldn't believe what was going on. And when you're a lifer like I've been, my Lakers, I was fortunate enough to be there the night that they knocked off the Sonics when they had Nick Van Exel and Ceballos and that group. And, no matter what, man, I was rooting for my guys. And it's been really tough the last 5 years. You're here on a Friday night and you're having a beer and you're watching this team, and we're not very good. This year, at least, the guys were competitive. We had a nice young group. But,
yeah, I agree.
What I'm hearing from a lot of people is, hey, they got LeBron. They still may not even make the playoffs in the West. So what I say to those guys, what I say to the detractors is, I don't care what sport you are in. So we'll take baseball for instance. If you're able to sign Trout as a free agent and you're the Marlins, I don't care how many pieces you don't have, you sign them.
It's so funny, Nissim, because I don't think we're hearing any of that kind of questioning outside of LA. The rest of us are just jealous and just shaking our head because, and you and I are sort of NBA lifers, this is part of a tradition, right? LA has always attracted, whether it was the Kareem trade many years ago, Shaquille O'Neal surprise free agency. This is the latest of the star power being attracted. And I'm really amazed how much the relationship, even for a growing legend like LeBron, the relationship and the opportunity to collaborate with Magic meant to him in this process. It was really, really interesting.
Well, look, the other day I said, if guys like Magic, you know, can attract guys to come and play ball here, then I was at a loss, bro. Because you have this great city. It's a great place to live. All righty? Then you have this great history with the Lakers. And you have this iconic figure that if you love basketball and you don't love Magic Johnson, there's something wrong with you.
Absolutely.
I tell people all the time, I couldn't stand the Celtics. I hated McHale. I hated DJ. I hated Larry Bird. But when they were no longer playing, I couldn't get me a Celtics jersey, man. But I got me a Larry Bird Indiana State jersey. Because I love basketball so much that I understand what that cat brought to the table. You know what I'm saying? So I think if you can't be sold on coming to L.A. to where we have all those championships by a man like Magic, man, I didn't know what we were going to do. So Magic being able to land LeBron is huge. And I think the fact that LeBron is a historian, he is nostalgic, he knows about the game, that this was a great opportunity for him to come to this place and be around a guy like that. And Magic brought up the fact, too, that no one understands him better than Magic. Look, Magic has 5 titles. He also lost 4 times in the finals. And so he knows a little bit about both. It's a grind. Sometimes you can have this great season and you don't end up winning it all. And I don't think it takes away from who you are as a player. You know, obviously there's a certain scrutiny that comes with it. But, you know, look, man, it's going to change the way we view the Lakers these next couple of years.
No doubt. And you're listening to the Cuban Lion, Nissim Leon Race Talk Show, talking about, we're going to get into a few other topics, namely El Tri, which is another conversation in a second. More big news for LA sports fans and Latino sports fans. Need some school people what the Lakers mean to the real LA, the LA you know, the Boyles Heights, the East LA, the Compton, the Balbaco on the weekends, the Carne Asada, the real neighborhoods that make LA a great city. What do the Lakers mean to you and your folks, Nissim, out there now?
Man, I could tell you it's a Laker town, it's a Dodger town. If you go back and think about what the parades look like, man, and when they show that parade, you see a lot of raza, bro. A lot of raza, because they absolutely are enamored with the Lakers. We get together, like you say. You know, I know for playoff games, you know, my wife would crack up because we'd be doing the defense chant and having 13 people over at my house watching a playoff game. And it would sound like you're at the Staples Center, because
that's right.
It was a sense of bringing us together. This was our team. You know, I think, too, the falling in love with the Lakers had to do, too, with Magic Johnson himself, what he means to the city economically, what he did for us after the riots when certain parts of the city were just totally burned to the ground, him building stuff up and saying, hey, man, we can do better. Let's make sure this never happens again. The amount of investment that this guy has put in, putting people to work, I think that's a love and admiration. That's why when they brought him back, I know he was doing his thing with the Dodgers, and what he's done there has been incredible also. But it just felt right to have Magic at the helm.
And Magic deserves credit, Nissim, because he was really one of the first sports stars, black sports stars, superstars that really got the Latino community and like embraced that part of the Laker Nation, and you know all the examples of it. I remember even in my political stuff when he endorsed Piedragosa the second time he ran for mayor, and that really, with him and Maxine Waters and the black political establishment, that really sort of helped turn the tide for Antonio in those days. But in general, Magic and then Kobe kept that tradition, obviously marrying a Latina and speaking Spanish and sort of having that love for all of what makes the LA fan base LA. Nissim, so as a Sixer fan that lost in the Kobe sweepstakes, in the LeBron sweep, I can't say I'm rooting for you, but I am happy for you and George Lopez and my great Laker friends. And as I said on social media, we'll see you in the finals. We'll have a nice suite for you because it's going to be tough for LeBron to get out the West, brother. It's going to be hard.
What did it do for the East? The East is wide open. I know. It's a lot of people are starting to say it's a foregone conclusion that the Celtics that they're going to be the front runners. And, I don't know.
They are the favorites.
That's true. Doubt. A lot of stuff has to happen. Obviously, they're in a great place.
Absolutely.
But the Sixers aren't far behind, man.
We're not. Let's talk about the World Cup, brother. We got to get to it. We can't avoid it. I know you were up in the wee hours in L.A., Nissim, today as we're taping this. El Tri, arguably the most popular team, soccer team in this country, nobly went down 2-0 against Brazil. Neymar sticks it to the team Mexico again. Nissim, set the stage for our people around the country, around the world, listening to Ray's Talk Show, what it was like in L.A. the last few weeks with the buzz for El Tri and leading to this sad but somewhat predictable result.
So, look, I'll take you to Father's Day. Father's Day, I'm having some pozole early morning at my little spot, Liliana's, and starting to get packed because it's Father's Day, but Mexico's playing at 8 o'clock. And fans, the Mexico team reminds me a lot of what the Cubbies used to be. Except it's see you in 4 years as opposed to see you next year. All righty? Every year, everybody's fired up. I'm fired up. My wife is Mexican. My kids are half Mexican. My compadres are Mexican. My best man is Mexican.
Gotcha, you live in Bulls Heights, bro.
Yeah, so we're fired up about Mexico. When I went to go see the South Korea game, I wore my New York Jets polo because it's all that I have that was green, and I didn't have a Mexico jersey or anything. I told my other two buddies that were Mexican, one was wearing a Green Lantern shirt, and another one was wearing like some generic avocado green shirt. I go, you guys should be ashamed of yourself. When Cuba plays, I wear my Cuba stuff. I just didn't have any Mexican gear. But that game won when they beat Germany. So you look back and you think they just beat Germany, the number one ranked team by FIFA, or number two. I'm not quite sure what they were, 1 or 2. But they're the defending World Cup champs. And when they won that game, my phone started ringing off the hook. And I was fired up because at that time, you could make a case that was the greatest win in World Cup history for Mexico.
Absolutely.
Okay? So I told my buddy, kind of what Lasorda told Dave Roberts last year after Game 6, it doesn't mean squat if you don't win tomorrow. And I said, look, if they go on and lose the 2 games and they don't get in, it's going to be very disappointing. This is not going to mean anything. So they go and they beat South Korea, and then everybody's saying they're already qualified. And I'm like, dude, they haven't qualified. Because if they beat them and then they beat them, all of a sudden, you got a tie. And it goes to goal differential, whatever, what have you, and Mexico could be out. So when Mexico was losing, I'm thinking to myself, oh, my God, this is their worst fear, realized. And they get saved by South Korea. And that's when it started dawning on me that, if they lose to Brazil, Germany was basically the last team in the group, last place. Their wins would be against last place Germany and second to last place South Korea. And now, how does the Germany win look to you? So although very good in the moment, it really wasn't anything. And Mexico loses again in the same fashion that they've lost in the last few World Cups. I think that they've only been past this stage twice. I think it's a good enough team where they can win these games. Obviously, Memo Ochoa was really stellar again. Played really,
as he always
really
is.
well.
That guy shows up to play in the big moments, doesn't he?
Absolutely, absolutely. But here's the thing with El Tri for me. I think a lot, and I think this will soften the blow a little bit, Ray. It's like watching Cuban baseball now. Cuban baseball, they don't believe in playing small ball. They don't believe in hit and run. They don't believe in moving the guy over. To be honest with you, I don't even know if they've ever intentionally walked somebody. They play ball the same way they've been playing ball for years. And at some point, you got to change. I think everything that Mexico does is kind of old school textbook. And I think if there was more creativity, a little more freedom, if you look at today, how many times they were looking for the perfect shot and allowed defenders to come and now be able to mark them, it was extremely frustrating. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I am no soccer expert. You know, I'm not Cantor. You know, I'm not Alexi Lalas. But from what I see,
you're not even Tab Ramos, Nissim. You know,
I'm
maybe
not
like
I'm not Tab
Ramos.
a
Tab light, Tab Ramos light.
You know, but I just feel like you got to just take some chances and shoot when the shot's there, and not always expect that you're going to get a perfect look.
The big thing, Nissim, on social media that I found interesting, and I thought it was quintessential Mexican-American sports fandom, was the memes and the critiques and the hate towards Neymar Jr., specifically him, you know, exaggerating on what it appeared to be a big exaggeration on that injury. Mm-hmm. And I thought about, when I think about that, I think about Mexican boxing fans and thinking about how, on some level, De La Hoya was never, to many, quite accepted by Mexican boxing fans. They thought he was too pretty. They thought he was too dainty. They thought he was dramatic, a mama's boy, whatever you want to say. And I flash forward to, this is the kind of style, as great as Neymar is, that this style that he has is a real turnoff to the Mexican fans. So I think for a lot of Mexican or three fans today, it was even more annoying to lose to this guy. With that, that dramatic,
I think you have a point, because the guy is very flamboyant. He is much more a finesse player. But with saying that, I think if they had a guy like that, look, I don't think Chicharito is as flamboyant, but I don't think you think he's this tough dude and embodies, the tough Mexicano persona. I don't think he does, but he's theirs. It's kind of like the LeBron thing right now, where people are like, there's guys in L.A. that are saying, no, I don't want him, man. I don't want him. He's Cleveland's. He's not ours. Shut up, because neither was Shaq, and neither was Wilt, and neither was Kareem. And then you loved them. Once they become our guys, I always tell the people the story when Gretzky got traded to the Blues, and he came with the Blues, and I named my dog Gretzky. All right? We went to go boo him. He was no longer us. I love Wayne Gretzky. I always will. But once you leave my team and you are playing for somebody else, I can't do the tipping of the hat or anything. I'm not going to hate. So if I was a Clevelander right now, right, I probably wouldn't have gave LeBron the thank you note. I would have thanked him when he got us the championship, and now he's gone. I won't burn a jersey. I won't do anything like that. But I won't be embracing him either. He's the enemy now.
Thanks, Joe Napolitano and Nissim Leon. And you can hear the entire interview, actually, with Nissim Leon, where we discuss more about the LA sports scene, the upcoming Canelo-GGG fight, and even some more, really get into some deep boxing talk on our Latino Sports Talk podcast feed, which you can subscribe and download on iTunes and anywhere else you can download a podcast along with Ray's talk show. So check out the full interview with Nissim Leon on Latino Sports Talk podcast. Last thing I will say is that all the work we're doing around the country matters. As horrible as the situation remains for thousands of children separated from their parents, the pressure we've put on this administration stopped the practice from continuing for those now arriving. And just hours ago, EPA Director Scott Pruitt resigned in shame after the organizing that has taken place around the Boot Pruitt movement. Victories like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's shows us we have the potential to organize our communities like never before. And indeed, our democracy depends on just that. Thank you so much for joining Ray's Talk Show. This is your host, Ray Collazo. Continue to subscribe, download, and support Ray's Talk Show anywhere you can download a podcast. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud. You can please write reviews and refer people to our show. If you would like to engage us on social media, you can check us out on Twitter at Ray's Podcast, at Ray's Podcast on Twitter, at Ray's Latino Talk on Instagram, and continue the conversation going. You can always email me at podcastrays@gmail.com. That's podcastrays@gmail.com. And let's continue the conversation in all these platforms. Thank you so much for joining Ray's Talk Show. Have a wonderful weekend. Keep enjoying that summer. And write Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez a check. Peace.